So it automatically records. So still 3 of us. Nobody banging on the door to get in. So I guess we'll wait a little while.
Yep, we can wait a minute.
Oh, we're up to 5 now. Kira and Matthew. Can you raise your hand if you can hear me? Thanks. This is my first time running a meeting, so I'm just trying to get the hang of it. We're gonna wait a few more minutes to give other people an opportunity to sign on, and then we can start the meeting. Thank you for coming. So I see it's 6 after 6 in the essence of time, so I don't hold people up since this looks like the sun's finally out. I'm going to get the meeting started. I'm Paul Niehoff with the City of Lewiston. I'm the project manager on this project, and this project is a pedestrian safety project that was funded by the DOT. Back in 2021, it was based on a 2019 to 2021 pedestrian safety process that the DOT, the Bicycle Coalition of Maine and Lewiston was involved in. And this intersection with the public involvement, this intersection rose to the top of people's concerns. I think I got 81% of the votes. So what the plan is to make pedestrian improvements to make the intersection safer than it is currently, because as we know, we have a lot of children using the middle school crossing at this location. So I will turn it over to Brandon Harvey of Doral Palmer, who's a consultant on the project, and let him walk you through where we are with the project.
Excellent. Thank you, Paul. Share my screen. Hopefully you folks can see that. Did that pop up for you all right, Paul?
It did.
Perfect. All right. As Paul mentioned, my name is Brandon Havu. I'm joined by Don Ettinger. We're from Goral Palmer, and we're very pleased to be teamed with the city in providing design services for this project, which is located at the intersection of Sabattus Street with Webster Street, Ash Street, and Central Avenue. The project itself is what's referred to as a locally administered project. So in this case, what that means is it's a teaming arrangement between the city of Lewiston and Maine DOT. So essentially there's state and local funds and oversight that go into the project development. The nature of the project, like Paul mentioned, is targeted at ADA related improvements. Some of you that are familiar with the area will know that there were some improvements that were completed at the intersection back 5 to 10 years ago, which are really these three that are shown up at the top side of the slide. And those are pretty easily recognizable by the concrete ramps that are out there today. And in those cases, the existing accommodations are already reasonable or pretty well reasonable. So the modifications in these areas will be somewhat limited. And we may do some stuff like extend the ramps out to improve access to buttons and upgrade some of the signal equipment. But largely, those three ramps up on the northerly side of the intersection won't be significantly changed. So the real focus of the project is these two locations shown on the bottom half of the slide, which are the Ash Street corners. The one on the left is the corner of Ash with the west leg of Sabattus Street. And the picture on the bottom right is the east corner of Ash Street over at Webster Street. Before we dive into some of the specifics, I'll start with some characteristics of the roadways that we use to help assess some of the design criteria and standards that we aim to achieve with the design. Sabattus Street carries about 8,000 vehicles a day, and it's a corridor priority 1. And Maine DOT ranks the roadways in the state with a priority between 1 and 5. So a priority 1 obviously is one of the higher priority roads, and it's a classification that's used for like the interstate highways and primary arterial routes that serve mobility travel between different regions. The speed of Sabattus Street is 25 miles an hour in this area. And I lumped the three side roads together. They were pretty similar. They have about 3,000 to 4,000 vehicles a day on each leg, and their priority is either 3 or 4, and each of those is 25 mile an hour speed as well. In this case, the project improvements are predominantly outside of the roadway and limited to the shoulder and sidewalks. So you'll see that much of the existing roadway standards will match the existing conditions. I'd like to start with a quick overview of the couple different types of graphics that we'll be using to present the proposed work. The first of which is this larger graphic in the center of the screen, and that's what we refer to as a plan view graphic. And basically what this is it's a view as if you're looking down from above. Similar to as if you were looking at the area in Google Earth, and we use different color shadings to present some of the proposed work. Some of the important ones on the graphic, you'll see the biggest area is the orange and the lighter shade of orange. That represents existing roadway pavement that won't be impacted as part of the work. You'll also see some yellow or mustard colors around the ramps in question. That's proposed pavement areas, so we'll be replacing any pavement that gets impacted. In gray, you'll see the lighter gray represents the existing sidewalks that the work will be tying into, and the darker gray would be the proposed work. Those will be bordered by this light green shade and bordering line work that represents the grading outside of the back of sidewalk or ramps. You'll also see, and you'll see this a little bit better in some of the slides to follow, there are some areas that are shaded in red, which represent some vegetation that may need to be removed to allow the proposed ramp reconstruction to be completed. And lastly, on plan, you'll see these dashed black lines that generally run parallel to each roadway. And that's what's referred to as the right-of-way limits or the property limits of the road itself. The second type of graphic we'll use is what we call a typical section, which is essentially if you were to take a slice out of the road and look at the depth and width of the materials, that's what this graphic shows. And it uses similar color shading to help correlate to the plan view graphic. Jumping into the improvements to the Ash Street ramps, you'll see that we're reconstructing both this westerly corner and the easterly corner at Webster Street. In the case of the west corner at Sabattus, you'll see the layout will generally replicate the existing conditions, but what we will be doing is helping to improve some of the slopes down into this landing area or turning space. And we'll also be flattening some of the slopes transverse to the road to really target some better ADA access to those corners. We'll also install a new pedestal pole with a push button and heads right behind the back of the sidewalk to make sure that it's accessible. Right now it's mounted to the existing signal pole. We're going to pull that off and give a dedicated pedestrian pole and heads at that spot. The patterned area you'll see shows that we're going to be reconstructing the ramp in concrete to match those other three ramps on the top side of the intersection. And outside of those areas, there are short stretches of asphalt sidewalk that will be reconstructed to tie back into the existing conditions. And that lets us transition some of those slopes so that we can get as compliant and accessible an area as possible within the ramps and landings. Jumping down to the east corner at Webster Street, very similar improvements in this area. One thing that you'll notice is that we are now separating the two ramps. So the crossing of Ash Street and the crossing of Webster Street will each have its own landing area with a separate button and heads. And we'll talk about the reason for that a little bit more in the slide to follow. Jumping into some of the crosswalk improvements. Most of the legs will be painted with the block style, high visibility white stripes that you guys are accustomed to seeing, and I think is what's currently out there. There's one exception to that, which is the westerly leg of Sabattus Street. What we're looking at that location is installing a concrete paver crosswalk, which what we're trying to do is help identify this location, this crossing, as the preferred crossing route for travel between Central Ave and Ash Street. And what we found when we looked at some of the traffic numbers was there was a pretty high volume of crossings of the easterly leg of Sabattus and over Webster Street to get to Ash Street, or between Ash Street and Central Ave. And what we would like to see happen is to have more folks use that westerly crossing so that they can just cross one point at this busier intersection. And if they need to switch sides either on Ash or Central Ave, it's safer and easier to do that away from this intersection where traffic volumes are less. Over at Webster Street, the primary reason that we're looking at reconstructing a new ramp over on the Webster Street leg is to help improve the skew angle of this crossing. As any of you that have used it today will know, this crossing is currently severely skewed, and it creates a condition where if you're walking particularly from Ash Street over towards the Sabattus Street corner, your back is more or less to the oncoming traffic coming from this leg of Sabattus Street. So what we're aiming for here is to provide better visibility for the pedestrian looking at that oncoming traffic, and also reducing the skew angle makes it a shorter length of crossing so that folks are able to get across the pavement area quicker than before. Some of the ancillary items related to the design. For coordination, there are overhead and underground utilities located on each of the corners and within the roadway. We don't expect any significant impacts to occur, but there may be some adjustments to the location of guy wires and whatnot that we'll be coordinating as design continues. For environmental, there isn't a significant amount of work associated with this project, but we will be evaluating it and any permitting requirements that may be necessary as we progress with design. Lastly is right-of-way. Showed the existing right-of-way back on the previous plan graphic. There are some impacts anticipated adjacent to the areas of the ADA ramp and sidewalk reconstruction. So if you're one of the impacted parties, DOT will be leading the right-of-way coordination effort, and they will make contact as we get a little bit further into final design and the grading limits are fully established. In regards to maintenance of traffic, so how we deal with the traffic flow through the intersection during construction, evaluations are ongoing between the city and DOT, and that will be something that we discuss. There may be some lane shoulder or shoulder closures and or lane closures to shift traffic around the work zones. The city will have police officers out at the intersection anytime work is ongoing to help direct traffic, and there may be both day and night work depending on the nature of what's ongoing. The cost of the project is right around $343,000, and that's the total project costs to cover design, construction, right-of-way related costs and whatnot. And lastly, for the schedule, design will continue into 2023 through 2024, and a similar time frame for the right-of-way process, probably either late 2023 or early 2024. That process will begin to allow construction to kick off either in 2024 or 2025. And with that, we'll be glad to answer any questions or comments you folks may have. And I think typically you can either chat in a comment or if you'd prefer, I think Paul may be able to unmute you as well.
Kira or Matthew, do you have any comments or questions for us? I just unmuted both of you, and just in case you've got any questions or concerns.
No, I'm all set. Thank you, though.
Okay,
No comments either. Thank you.
okay. Well, thank you for coming. If you think of something afterwards, I think my email was in the notice of this meeting. So just give me a shout if something does happen to come up.
Excellent.
So I think if we don't have any other questions or comments, I will end the meeting. Thank you, Brandon, for running through that. And thank you, Kira and Matthew, for attending. And everyone have a good evening.
Thank you.